Hello and welcome to another edition of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. It's our last show of 2022 and we're going out with a bang. Our guest is Megan DiTrolio, senior editor at the New York Times. She's the lead editor for A2-A3, and she led a refresh of those pages. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the executive producer of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along and the guest host. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. Please like, please comment, please share, retweet, tag your friends, let folks know that they can tune in to a great show. Remember, if you're not watching live, first of all, thank you for joining us on the replay. And as soon as the show is over, you'll be able to watch it again from the beginning. And want to make sure you tag folks, let us know where you're watching from so we can say hello to our loyal viewers. And if you're new, let us know that you're new and this is your first time watching. We always welcome new folks to the New York Times Read Along family. Before we go in too much deeper into the show, there's so much to cover. We have of course, the A2-A3 refresh we'll be covering. We'll be talking about the lives they lived, a special report from New York Times Magazine about children killed by gun violence in 2022. There's also Puzzle Mania and a huge report on the war in Ukraine, Putin's war. So we'll do our best to cover everything. Stick with us. It should be a great show. Here's a quick preview of what's to come. This week, our New York Times Read Along guest is Megan DiTrolio, senior editor at the New York Times. She's the lead editor of A2-A3 and just led a major refresh of those pages. Neil Parekh will be the guest host. Megan will walk us through the process the team went through to pitch their vision. The overall goal of these pages, in Megan's words, has been to pull back the curtain and explain how it all works. Might We Suggest includes weekend recommendations from around the newsroom. The Dateline shows where Times journalists are reporting from around the world. A Word Through the Times traces how one word has changed throughout the Times, and In Times Past by David Dunlap highlights pieces from the Times' archives. They've also added Just One Question, On the Scene, and In Our Inbox. Megan will also review the story behind the story, the Times Insider columns, and the bursts they publish on their website. We'll also take a look at the lives they lived, the stories of 12 American children killed by guns in 2022, and Puzzle Mania, the annual special section devoted to puzzles. Sri Srinivasan is our host. I am the executive producer and occasional guest host, Neil Parekh. Paula Kiger helps produce the show, engaging with the audience on Facebook and LinkedIn. The show is produced by Digimentors. We produce high-quality virtual and hybrid events for organizations big and small around the world. We also do social and digital consulting, training, and workshops. Again, Megan DiTrolio is our guest. She's the lead editor for A2 and A3. Live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. That gives you a bit of a preview of what's to come. And as I said, there's also a special report on the war in Ukraine, Putin's war. So let's look forward to looking through all of that. First, as we do every Sunday, we welcome the folks who are joining us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. If you're watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, we can put your comments on the screen. If you're watching on our website, we'll keep an eye for comments at the bottom of the page. Unfortunately, we can't pull in comments from Twitter. Doug Levy is watching on Facebook from the West Coast, early 5:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We always appreciate that, Doug. Patricia Freudenberg is watching from New York. Thank you as always, Patricia. Soumya Grover is watching from Lebanon. Soumya is the intern with Digimentors. Thank you so much for your help and support with the read along on the days that you've sat in for Paula Kiger. Stephen Kaplan is watching from a chilly but always beautiful Washington, D.C. No, he's not in Ramsey, New Jersey. Stefan, I know you got up early for an early train. I think it was yesterday to come down here. Glad to have you in our neck of the woods. I'm based, as folks might know, in Springfield, Virginia. And Patricia's already commenting on Puzzle Mania, the super mega crossword that's in today's paper. We'll definitely take a close look. Ken Fisher is watching from Iowa, 1 hour west of the Mississippi. Thank you, Ken. Diane Stefani is watching from Margate, New Jersey. Thank you, Diane. Watching from a spin class at the JCC. That's one way to spend your morning. Ted Coltman is watching from here in Washington, D.C., watching on YouTube. Ted, thank you as always for joining us. And we should, Martin is giving us a heads up that we should talk about the World Cup final. Vamos Argentina. Thank you, Martin, for joining us. Last week, we had a special show. Andrew Doss, who is the on the sports desk, he's leading World Cup coverage. We had an incredible show with him talking about how they're covering the World Cup. And of course, today, the World Cup final is at 10 a.m. So we'll do our best to finish right on time so you can catch the beginning of that match. Sujata Chandrasekhar is wishing everyone a happy holidays. Dr. Chandrasekhar, thank you so much. Mary Curtis is joining us from Charlotte, North Carolina. Mary is a political columnist for Roll Call, former Times person as well. Very interested in today's show. And Mary is a former guest as well. Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Rahadian is watching from Bayshore, Long Island. Rahadian, so thank you. So much appreciate you joining us. Thank you for being here. And he's wishing my love and best wishes for the holiday season and New Year to all. So with that, what we want to do is to take a quick look at the paper to see what is on the front page of every section. So let's go ahead and turn our attention to the paper. As you can see, the front page is dominated by this special report, Putin's War. We'll take a look at that. That's actually a special section that they have, and it's really great online as well. The lead is a two-column lead, bonanza for arms makers as military budget surges. Amid Ukraine war and growing threats, U.S. plans $858 billion in spending. The other story above the fold, major chains for childcare earn big profit. During a shortage, the high end thrives. Below the fold and right at the fold, with Christmas Sunday, it was Christmas a Sunday, pews may be empty. That's interesting. U.S. scrutinizes political money linked to FTX. And then on the left, the next epoch of planet Earth might be today. The fold, so I'm going to open this up a little bit so you can see that Putin's war story actually goes from the top of the page all the way down in terms of the graphics that they're showing. And again, there is a special section that we will show you. I always like pointing out that at College Point, they can print the full section, approximately 40 pages or so. But when they print the paper around the country, they rely on printing presses for other newspapers. The Seattle Times, for example, in Seattle, and the Washington Post here in Washington, D.C. They can only, some of these presses can only go 22 pages. So the 23rd page is almost a separate section. And this one features an obit for Dorothy Pittman Hughes, Black feminist trailblazer, is dead at 84. What an iconic photograph that is of her with Gloria Steinem from 1971. As I mentioned, we have Putin's War is a special section. We're definitely going to take a look at that. Um, it's a really impressive standalone piece. New York Times Magazine, that's the other thing we want to spend time with. The text on the bottom. Darius died this year at the age of 11. He and the other children featured in this issue were killed by what has become the leading cause of death for American kids, gun violence. These are the stories of the lives they lived. This is a special section devoted to gun violence, to kids, profiles of 12 children who were killed, but also a really great data report as well. We'll definitely want to spend time with that. Puzzle Mania, the New York Times' largest ever crossword. It's a super mega crossword. This is just the front page. You can see the image on the front and the bottom half. We will take a look at that. We're not going to try and solve it. That would be a whole other show to try and solve that together. But we'll definitely take a look at Puzzle Mania. The other section, Sunday Opinion, an unsteady equilibrium has held in Israel and the West Bank for a generation. Its days may be numbered. Will the Holy Land come undone? By Thomas Friedman. And that's the graphic, the image is a full page image. So you can see the bottom half there. The other articles on the referred on the bottom, is it really a good idea to introduce AI to school classrooms? This has been the most closely scrutinized and culturally contested World Cup in history. And car ownership isn't always a path to independence. Sometimes it's a trap. Sunday Business, the fate of the emptiest downtown in America. Which one is that? It is San Francisco. You may recognize that from the image. San Francisco's tech workers are still at home. The $17 salad place is expanding in the suburbs. So what's next? Sunday Styles, the year we lost it. We raged against the machine and then against one another. Very interesting illustration for the front page. Sunday Styles. Harrison Ford on the cover. Man needs no introduction. Whoops, there goes the camera. A star shot since a long time ago. Harrison Ford, now 80, keeps trying new things, including the lead in 1923, his first major TV role. Just don't ask him to get all touchy-feely about it. And of course, a new Indiana Jones movie is coming out. Book review, Undercover. A trove of personal letters reveals the gruff, witty, opinionated side of the late spy novelist Jean Le Carré. That will definitely be interesting to read. So we will encourage folks to take a look at that when they can. But that is the front page of each of the sections. That's an overview of what's to come. But now we want to turn our attention and welcome Megan DiTrolio to the show. Megan is, of course, a senior editor at the New York Times and the lead A2-A3 editor. And we're going to be talking about the refresh of A2-A3 under her leadership. Megan, welcome.
Hello. Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. Just wanted to add a few more comments. Dr. Chandrasekhar, the gun violence section is heartbreaking. We physicians have been yelling into the void about gun control forever. Miriam Berkeley is watching from Hell's Kitchen, New York. Thank you, Miriam. Sam is watching from Brooklyn, excited for today's show. That's a huge smile. Megan, do you know Sam? Is he
That's my fiance, and he's watching from the other room. So
from the other room?
Yeah.
Are you in Brooklyn or are you elsewhere in the New York City
We're
area?
actually in New Jersey, so he's
Yeah.
lying in that comment right now. We're from Brooklyn, though.
I mean, come on, Sam. Good morning from the living room or wherever you're
Yeah.
at. But Who knows? Maybe he'll make a cameo
Maybe.
later in the show. You never know.
Let's see.
But thank you, Sam, for joining us. Appreciate it. Ellen is watching from the Upper East Side, and Patricia says, welcome, Megan, as well. So, Megan, tell us a little bit about your work at the Times. You joined last year in October.
Yep.
Sam fessed up right away. We caught him. So thank you, Sam. You joined in October of last year after coming from Marie Claire, right?
Yep.
And your assignment was to lead A2-A3. And in November of this year, you launched a refresh. Did you start working on that right away?
Yeah, pretty much. So I did join last October, and I was part of the reason I was brought on was to actually launch this refresh of pages 2 and 3, which has sort of been long in the works. I think it had been, a goal for a while now. So pretty much right when I started, it took a couple months for me to get the feel of the pages and the content. And then I would say in January, we really hit the ground and started brainstorming all of our new elements and doing some of those kind of first steps that you need to do when you launch a refresh. So we've been working on it now for the better part of a year and finally launched in November, which we were really excited about.
And so this is the article that you wrote inside the making of Inside the Times.
Yeah.
From sticky notes to printed pages, how our reimagined section was designed with readers in mind. Tell us a little bit about that process. How many brainstorming sessions, sticky notes, like what was the operational side of going from the old layout, which we do want to show people just to
Yeah.
give them a sense of what we're talking about. So this is the old A2 had the masthead at the top, and let's see, I'll move the computer this way. Had the masthead at the top, inside the Times, newspaper and beyond, right? A lot of ads, a headline in history. Page 3 had the of interest, noteworthy facts from today's paper. Our regular viewers will know that we spend time with A2-A3. We take a look at the details. We always look at what these noteworthy facts are. The spotlight, the conversation, quote of the day, all these features. This is what when you joined, this is what you were looking at in terms of the paper, right?
Yeah.
And then you started this process, the sticky note process. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So to be honest, the start of the refresh process was a lot of like throwing spaghetti against the wall and just seeing what was going to stick. So it involved myself and some of the great editors on our team, Terrence McGinley, Sarah Gephardt, who's our designer, Andrew Sonder, and a whole kind of bunch of people, whole cast. And we basically just locked ourselves in a conference room on the 3rd floor of the Times's newsroom headquarters, which is in Times Square, and spent a ton of time brainstorming new ideas. So I think we came up with over 20 new feature ideas. And then the hard part became sort of like cutting them down and trying to figure out what actually was a good idea and what just was good in our heads. What could we actually execute every single day? What sort of complemented something else, right? Like if we had an interview, would we have a write through next to it? Or if we had something that was a little bit more fun in tone and nature, would we want to pair that with something a little bit more serious? So there was a lot of editing of the ideas. Part of the reason we were doing this refresh was to just give the reader more insight into how our journalism works, into how the Times works. We actually lost that ad bank that you showed when you showed A2. We used to have an ad bank on the left side of A2, which we got rid of. So we're filling that with all new editorial content. So it's just giving the reader more behind the scenes access. And we really wanted to sort of like surprise and delight them with all of our new elements. So we come up with all of these new ones. And then our designer, Sarah, really had to spend a lot of time trying to place everything together, like what would actually fit on the page, what would look good together. So it was a really collaborative effort there. And once we landed on sort of the cast of new content elements that we were excited about, then it came time to refining those ideas, making them better, poking at holes in them, testing them out. We did a ton of testing, and eventually pitching it up the ladder, which I can share more about. But it was a pretty fun and kind of intense but rewarding process.
Sure. I do want to point out that we have the comment about the Tiffany ad from Ellen, the No Tiff
Mm,
ad. We had a show with Stuart Elliott 3 years ago now, I think, maybe even longer than that, where he walked us through A2-A3 and talked about how Tiffany's had paid for placement in that top right column for almost 100 years.
mm,
Even if you don't see it here, it over the last year that changed. They stopped paying for that ad. They had a banner ad across the bottom and did other things. But that was when we were first kind of keyed into some of the background of A2-A3, was when Stuart Elliott was on the show. So we've been paying attention to some of these changes and what's been going on. Let's take a look at some of the features that you've talked about, and then tell us more about the process in terms of having to pitch it to your the executive editor, the print editor, etc. One of the sections that you added is "Might we suggest?" Recommendations from around the newsroom.
yeah.
These aren't byline pieces; these are just references to sections. Writing a thank you note. In this example, writing a thank you note, reading your way through Dublin, chatting with your cat.
I knew you were going to pause on that one. Yes, chatting with your cat, which actually
Um,
apparently has some scientific background to how that might be good for you and strengthen your bond with your pets. So we
it's
do
good for the
recommend it.
pet as well. I had a cat for 19 years, and we definitely had many long. But I have to admit, I actually it wasn't he didn't speak English. I had to meow to him, and he would meow back. I mean, there was a definite
That's
rhythm.
one way to do it. Yeah.
And preparing for life after Twitter, very timely. I
Mhm.
will say that I did post to Mastodon a promo for this show. I had joined Mastodon about early November, but didn't know what I was doing with it.
Mm,
And then after journalists were banned from Twitter on Thursday, the Black Thursday, if you will,
yeah.
I said, let me fire up Mastodon again. Let me see if I can figure it out. So I've been experimenting and learning with that. But tell us about more about Might We Suggest?
Yeah, so we launched this element to appear on weekends on Saturday because we wanted to sort of provide the reader with a quick roundup of different things that they might consider doing um, over the weekend, sort of collected from around the newsroom. So we're sort of deviating from the culture coverage here. We didn't want to recommend like movies or books or things to listen to because our culture team has that covered and obviously has really great suggestions. So what we were really looking to do was to round up sort of offbeat, off kilter items and suggestions that we think people might want to spend their time with that weekend. And also referring the reader to the core article where they can maybe read more about that. So, for example, that first example is writing a thank you note. That was a styles article that week that really dived into the benefits and the art of writing a longhand thank you note. So both the benefits of like doing the writing process and also the psychology behind what you get out of it as a sender and what the receiver feels as the person on the receiving end and how that might strengthen your bond. So we wanted to suggest that a reader maybe try sending a note of gratitude that weekend to a person that they love or are thankful for. So it's just sort of sweet recommendations like that, where, if you have an extra hour or so that weekend, why not give it a try? You might be surprised by what you learn.
And one of one of the features of A2-A3 that we always noted, and much to the chagrin of our colleague Paula Kiger, whose role it is to drop links to articles in Facebook and LinkedIn and give people something to refer to later. Uh, in the we'll call it the old A2-A3, much of that content, except for the Inside the Times article, much of that content was not online. It was
Mhm.
a special for the print edition. Um, Up till now, even with the refresh, most of these pieces are not online or not kind of fully organized online. But you do have a plan to move them online, correct?
Yeah, so A2 and A3 have traditionally been print first pages. So that means that we are writing and editing them for the print audience. Um, it's sort of a dashboard to that day's news. We're really sort of guiding and curating the reading experience that day. So they are done print first. However, we do have kind of phase two of our refresh plan, which you'll have to stick around this year to see some of that, is to put a lot of this content online. We've already started doing that. So one of the pieces of content I'm sure we'll talk about soon is a mini feature by David Dunlap that we're doing every
Yes.
other week on our really robust Times archives. That is online and is actually, I think, don't quote me on this, the first time our team has ever put a feature story that's not an insider, like online, a standing column in that way. So we're really excited, and we definitely have big plans to get a lot of this content out there to as many people as we can.
That's great. We're definitely looking forward to that. Patricia Freudenberg has a really good question. Uh, is the um, uh, is the refresh taking on any new concepts, or is it closed? Do you see this as an evolving product?
Yeah, we're never completely closed. I think we're always going to be evolving. I mean, we sort of evolve as the paper evolves and as news evolves, which happens literally every single day. So, yes, we are going to continue to test new things out. Try out new things for fit, see if it works, see if we like it. And we're absolutely open to reader feedback and comments. These pages are designed for readers. They're really made with the reader in mind. We actually introduced a new element that appears on weekdays where we incorporate reader comments and feedback.
Hmm.
That's how committed we are to working with the reader, pulling back kind of the breaking the fourth wall, so to speak. So please email us. It's the letters email, which is actually listed on page A2. Let us know your thoughts. I'd love to hear from you. I try to respond to all of the readers that write in. So yeah, let us know.
What's the email address again?
It's our letters. Let me make sure I'm giving you the right one. It's listed on A2 and it's our letters email. Let's look. Yeah, just letters at nytimes.com.
Great. And so we added it to the bottom of your banner at the top in case folks want to make any suggestions. Patricia did say awesome in terms of the fact that it's still open. And she also asked, getting back to the sticky notes, was one of them the most memorable or rewarding that made it? Did you frame any of them, at least in your mind?
So it's so funny because a lot of this process involved like printing out mock pages basically. And then the team would write down the new concepts on sticky notes. So the name of the concept, might we suggest? And then we'd move it around on the layout. Like, we want to put it in the top left of A2, or do we want to put it in the middle of A3? And we just moved the sticky notes around to see where things would look best. I say this in the article that I wrote, but like half the time we would like rip them up, we'd like throw them away, be like, oh, that's a trash idea. And then 2 hours later, we like pull them out of the trash and we like smooth them out and we think, okay, actually that's kind of a good idea. And maybe we just need to tweak it this way. So we still have that spread with all of the sticky notes all over it. We have like 10 more of those too. It's just one of many. And yes, we still have it. I don't have it framed. Maybe I should figure out a way to like
Right.
save it and keep it nice. It's not that nice looking, but keep it preserved.
One note, when if another team goes through that process, you might want to put a note on the recycling bins for the custodial staff. Please don't recycle, because what if you don't wait 2 hours. What if it's the next day that you think about, oh my God, that was a great idea that we threw out yesterday.
Yeah.
It's already recycled and gone. You can't
I
go
like
back and
rolled it up and took it home with me. So I was like a crazy lady on the subway with a big long newspaper roll coming out of my bag, and I would just
yeah,
shuffle it back and forth.
that's great. That's great. Um, so let's go continue with some of these new features because there's some really great. I particularly like this one, the Dateline, where
Yeah.
Times journalists are reporting around the world. Um, this shows you it's a map. Obviously, you get the idea. It's in this case, it's just four. I think it's is it usually four or um,
Yes.
Carthage, North Carolina, Buenos Aires, Kherson, Ukraine, and Johannesburg. Um, talk about the importance of explaining that Times reporters are actually on the ground in a location. They're not just sitting in Manhattan working off a wire copy or phoning it in, if you will.
Yeah.
Talk about the importance of a dateline.
Yeah. So a dateline basically is when a location of a place is listed in that all caps text that you might see at the start of an article. And what that cues to the reader is that the reporter spent the majority of their reporting from that location. But what we found was that actually a lot of readers didn't know that. They thought, oh, maybe that's where the story is based or that's where the sources are based. But it wasn't necessarily clear that that's where the reporter was actually doing, the majority of the work. Part of our job at Insider is to explain how the sausage gets made, right? Like to explain how everything works and to increase transparency about our process with the reader. So we really wanted to create like a sense of continuity between the Dateline and as like a term and the fact that yeah, these are where our journalists are, they're on the ground in these places, they're reporting from there. So what we did is we worked with the graphics team at the Times to make this world map that you see here. And every single week we select 4 locations from articles that publish that week and drop little pin drops on the locations. So right, like Buenos Aires. And then what we do in the text underneath is give a quick explainer of what the story was about and what the reporter was doing there. So we try to list 4 every week. We try to sort of pick different spots across the globe and just give the reader the broadest sense of how sweeping and global our report is. So we work with the graphics team every week to pull this together. We really love it. Another team that's been really helpful in this effort is the Times' Trust team. They're a team that's devoted also to increasing transparency for the reader and sort of rounding out our standards. And they've been building out these items that you've maybe seen online, extended bylines, where we explain a little bit more about the reporter. So we're really incorporating some of that information into these bits here. But I also just think it's really cool and cool to look at when you open your paper and see this sort of map view of where people are reporting from.
Now we've talked about the might we suggest and now the Dateline. Are they on a schedule? Do they appear on certain days of the week?
Yes, so the Dateline runs on Sundays, so our Sunday readers will be able to see it, and Might We Suggest runs on Saturdays. It's just sort of kind of a welcome to the weekend.
Got it. As a reminder for folks, if you're watching on Facebook and if this video has been shared, please make sure to press play on the video itself. So if you leave any comments, we will be able to see your comment and put it on the screen. And it'd be great to be able to incorporate you into the show, incorporate our viewers into the show. The next piece that we want to take a look at is word through the times. Tracing how one word has changed throughout our report. This example is the word vibe. Just a quick
Mhm.
excerpt. Vibe truly entered the Times' journalistic lexicon in the 80s. In a travel essay, a reporter observes Sicily's ancient Greek time vibe. Tell us a little bit about this feature.
Yeah, this was a fun feature. I remember when we came up with this idea, we were in a conference room and I think we were talking about the word misinformation actually, and we were trying to like wrap our heads around how that word had changed so much. We might feature it in one of these words at the Times in the next couple of months. And we sort of came up with this idea, how cool would it be to track and trace how a word has changed through the lens of the Times's report. So we did just that. And what we do every other Sunday, this runs opposite with another Sunday feature, that David Dunlap history feature that I mentioned, is we dive into the Times's archives and really track how a word's meaning might have changed and how our usages of it have changed. So this was, I think, our first one that we did. The word was vibe. Sarah Diamond writes these. She's a Times staffer, and she is great at parsing through many, many, many years and files of Times archives. And she talks about how vibe was first used in the Times, I think in the 30s, as a reference to the vibraphone, which is a musical instrument, and sort of tracks how the word evolved with pop culture, with just sort of changing culture. So we start at the vibraphone, and then I think we end at like a Styles article where the writer's saying, you got to understand the vibe of this fashion show. So we take the reader on that sort of historical journey of this word's like Times's etymology, if you will.
And what I think is interesting with with this article in particular is that when you look through the archives and you do that research, you're not afraid of pointing out typos in the Times.
Mm-hmm.
Vibe actually made it into the paper earlier than that as a reference to the executive vibe president of the New York Chamber of Commerce
Yeah.
instead of vice president.
Yeah.
Um,
We have
you
some
easily
fun
could have
doing
just
that.
you could have just overlooked that I mean, no one would have known that that was there, right?
Yeah.
But you put that into the article.
Yeah, we like to have some fun with it. I think it's funny when you see, I don't think it's funny when I see typos on my pages now, like from yesterday, that gives me like anxiety, but I do think it's funny when we're looking at, a paper from the 1920s and something's wrong. And, we're human. And I think readers like to see the authenticity of it all. And it's just sort of a fun way to kick off a piece with a typo, an intentional typo.
Right. Or calling attention to a typo that you didn't make. So that it's easy. If you
Sure.
didn't make it, that's fine.
Yeah.
I can certainly appreciate your striving for perfection as far as typos and grammar is concerned. I'll point out a last minute call I made to our resident expert, Paula Kiger, on this very page when I was quoting from the story and had I'm quoting the sentence, but then there's a quote inside the ancient Greek time vibe.
Mm,
I, I wanted to make absolutely sure that, it's the double quotes with the single quote, with the period inside the single quote. I mean, that's the attention
that's
to detail
tricky.
that you
Yeah.
need, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I thought. Just wanted to make sure.
You're not
Just
the
wanted to
only
make sure.
one. Yeah. It's a tricky thing to parse through.
Absolutely. In times past, so let's start talking about David Dunlap. And before
Yeah.
we even talk about the piece that you incorporated, I want to share with folks this article, high above the newsroom history of the Times. There's a museum at the Times on the 15th floor of the Times building in New York. There's a great piece by Emmett Lindner. It was an Inside the Times Insider piece itself from October of last year. But this is
Mhm.
one of the displays, and we're a big fan of the Times. I'm a big fan of history, so this speaks to a lot of my interests. But you're effectively taking the archives and the artifacts and putting them into the paper as part of this refresh.
Mhm.
This is the first article. Actually, this is the first one, volume one, number one. I think it's appropriate that that's also the first in times past piece. It's about the very first issue of the New
Mhm.
York Times.
Yeah, so we were really excited to get David Dunlap on board for this project. David is sort of our unofficial Times historian. He's a longtime Times reporter and just an overall like excellent person to work with. And he is the curator at the Times Museum, which you just mentioned. We have a great insider by Emmett Lindner on that. The Times Museum is, as you said, a museum on the 15th floor that sort of houses all of these really great Times archives. So artifacts, newspaper clippings, pieces of old printing plates. There's just kind of an incredible amount of artifacts in this museum. And when I first got to the Times, I didn't realize that it was employees only. It's not actually open to the public. And we thought, how great would it be if we could bring this sort of VIP museum experience of David walking you through the museum and showing you all of the items and explaining each item, which he did for me when I started. How cool would it be if we could bring that to the reader every other Sunday and give them this sort of one-on-one time with David and with the artifacts? So that's exactly what we're doing with In Times Past. We are bringing this sort of museum experience to the reader. As you said, we launched with our first ever issue of the New York Times from 1851, which was really exciting to kind of be able to dive a little bit more into that issue, then called the New York Daily Times, which I actually didn't know until we did this project. Our one from last week was, maybe we'll talk about it with Puzzle Mania, was the introduction of the Times crossword, which was kind of a cool backstory. It actually, the Times was like super anti-games and kind of anti-fun. And then around World War II, the Times actually introduced the Times crossword to like introduce some fun into people's lives. So we can get into that a little bit more, but David
we have it
has so
right
much knowledge that he has to share.
Go ahead and jump into it now. We have the origins of the crossword
Oh,
right on the
yes.
screen for folks.
Yeah, so you can see here, right after the attack of Pearl Harbor, the editor of the Sunday section wrote this very formal memo to the publisher at the Times and basically said, I really think we need to introduce a puzzle into the paper. We don't know if power is going to get cut and people are going to be sort of like upset and depressed, right? And it's sort of this really difficult time. Let's try to do something fun. Let's try to bring them a little bit of fun in their paper. And like I said, before this time, the Times was very proud that they didn't run cartoons, that they didn't run games. Like that was sort of a point of pride. So they decided to launch this crossword, and we wanted to highlight that because it was a really cool sort of moment that defined a lot of what was to come. Right now, the Times has a really robust games offering. We run the mini on page A3 every day, which the mini is like the one I can do. I'm not that great at the real crosswords, so we were excited to dive into this little piece of history.
Absolutely. And I will say that one of my goals for 2023 is and we've been in touch with David. What I want to do is to come up to New York and pre-record a segment with him where he gives us a tour of the museum, and then we show it on a Sunday morning. So that would be really cool.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe if I don't know if you're spending a lot of time in the office, but if you are, I'll make it a point. Maybe we can
Yeah,
have lunch or
that would be
something.
great.
But yeah, that's definitely the idea of going through the museum, getting that tour would be incredible.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely incredible. So that's in the past. We have a just one question feature. Times journalists share a key insight about their work. This
Yep.
example is Vanessa Friedman talking about her interview with Shannon Abloh 1 year after the death of her husband. Tell us a little bit about how this feature came about.
Yeah, so this was kind of a funny one. Just one question was born out of this idea of what if we really wanted to do an insider on a story, but we already had some things slotted that day, or maybe we didn't know about the story. Insider, we haven't talked about Insider yet, but that's our marquee big feature that we run on A2 every day, where we really explain the story behind one story, usually in that day's paper. But sometimes there's two stories in that day's paper, and we only have one insider. So we thought, what if we launched a new element on A3 where we go out to that journalist, the reporter behind a story, and just ask them the one thing we really want to know about that piece, and sort of highlight their work in that way and give a little bit of that insider flavor to another article in that day's paper. So we did that here with Vanessa, who's always really generous with her time. She interviewed Shannon Abloh, and Shannon Abloh is a very private person and has always been, and has never given an interview. And Vanessa was able to secure the first interview with Shannon after her husband's passing. And we really wanted to know, like, Vanessa, how did you gain Shannon's trust? How did you make her feel comfortable enough to go on the record for an interview? She's a very private person. What did that look like? So Vanessa gives us some great context about how she was actually at an event over the summer, and she was sitting with Shannon, and they started talking about this and planted the seed. And Vanessa spent the summer sort of emailing Shannon, like checking in, let me know when you're comfortable, and really cultivated that relationship, and was able to write a really lovely story in the end. So just that one snippet, right, of, okay, this was the first interview with her. Like, how did you get that? How did you secure it? That's something we as insider want to know and share with the reader.
I mean, I think you can do that with almost any profile, any portrait. How'd you get the interview would almost be, it could almost be
That's
its
a
own
good
series.
idea.
There's a
Yeah.
thought right there.
Yeah.
Right? I think, and I would even, if we're brainstorming ideas, photography is another one, right? How'd you get the shot?
Yeah.
Type
That
of
is
thing.
actually an element that we have in the works. So stay tuned.
No, Megan, this is the first time you've even thought about using that
You're right.
idea. It just, out of this show, and then, a month later it's in print.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
how you're supposed to. We'll just edit that little bit out of
Yeah,
the
for sure.
on the scene. This is really fun. What times
Yeah.
journalists are seeing and hearing in the field. So this is the print version of a piece that you're doing.
Mhm.
But there's also an online version of this. So when it's in print, it's on the scene. This
Mhm.
happens to be a piece about the COP27 summit in Cairo.
Yep.
Um, but I want to start off with the on the scene that you did online, um, about Liz Truss's resignation as Prime
Mhm.
Minister of Great Britain. So we'll just take a look at that real quick. I'm going to get the size right so we can. So this is, if folks are used to seeing the New York Times on the web or on their phone, these are pieces that go horizontally instead of vertically, right? You have a little bit of
Mhm.
text, an image. This piece, this was written by Isabella Kwai, um, and it just scrolls through to the right.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Tell us about this specific piece, the Liz Truss piece.
Yeah, so we internally we call these bursts. We actually have an insider on what a burst is, explaining sort of the format. There are these cards that a reader can swipe. If you're on mobile, it's sort of the shape of like an Instagram slideshow or something like that. And they sort of provide the reader with like quick snippets of information. And what we like to do as insider is this item called on the scene, where a journalist who is on the scene, on the ground somewhere where a big news event is breaking, sends us what they're seeing, what they're hearing. So I think this was the day that Liz Truss stepped down, and I knew Isabella was in London, and I Slacked her. I do a lot of that. I do a lot of cold slacking, just randomly emailing and slacking people and being like, I know you're covering this, and can you tell me about this? So I messaged her and I said, hey, like, I think you're in London right now. What's the environment like? Like, how are people reacting? Can you give us a quick snapshot of what that looks like? And she was really game, which was great. And we went ahead and pulled this together in, I want to say like under 2 hours, like a quick turnaround. And we were able to put that in print the next day. And I worked with our dedicated burst team to sort of build this online in a digital burst. And readers really love this format. It's so kind of fun and easy for them to swipe and learn more information, get sort of that insight, an inside look. So we were excited to play with this format. We're doing it a lot more often.
And here's that explainer about this from January. Callie Holterman wrote this: to continue reading, swipe left, um, showing other examples, incorporating video as well
Yep.
into these bursts. And now these are, it's interesting because it's not something that your team has an exclusive kind of hold on. Anyone can write a burst, right?
Yeah, so Burst is just a new story form at the Times, just like a right through article or an interview. It's just a new way to sort of give the reader information and to tell the story. So obviously you want to make sure that the content's the right fit for this type of format. Not everything is. Some things need much more space and time to get into, but anybody at the Times can create a burst, and I think people are doing so more often. And what's great, I think, which one are you looking at right now?
But
Oh
this
yeah.
is the spices.
Yes. So she was there, obviously, I think at that spice farm, and it's really great because you can get that bird's eye view, right? Like pictures from the reporter, video diary from that person. So it's a really fun format to play with.
And I haven't seen a lot that incorporate video like this. I've usually seen the ones that are just images. So this is kind of interesting to see. And also, I want to highlight even in this burst, to me, reporting from Zanzibar with the little red pin
Hmm.
really makes it stand out. Really
Yeah.
highlights that whole Dateline issue that we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
so continuing with the refresh and the new features in our inbox, in
I
my
know
inbox.
you take issue with this. Yeah.
This is a section highlighting pieces or an individual piece from the large selection of newsletters that the
Yep.
New York Times has. This one in particular talks about it's the climate forward newsletter, and
Hmm.
a conversation between Somini Sengupta and this Dr. Anne Christine Duhaime, I'm guessing on the last name, about whether our brains can be trained to make a difference in climate change, to actually avert catastrophe.
Yeah.
Um, where did this idea come from? Whose brain did this come from?
So the pages have been featuring newsletter excerpts for many years, but what we really wanted to do was give this a lot more prominence and space on the page. The Times has so many newsletters, really smart, well-written newsletters that cover topics both broad and niche. And we wanted to bring a lot of the newsletter cuts, if we could, to the print reader, because a lot of them otherwise don't appear in print. So we're sort of showcasing to the reader, like, hey, here are all of these other places that you can get your news from. We're kind of calling out all of these different newsletters, as well as providing them with really cool, interesting content that they're not going to find anywhere else in print. So this is a really great example of a piece that was super smart and interesting and probably wouldn't have had a home otherwise, that we could take and put onto our page. We love the Climate Forward newsletter. We feature the virus briefing quite often, the On Politics newsletter, the California Today newsletter. So all of these kind of other types of stories that exist, maybe online, maybe for subscribers, but as a print reader, you might not know it exists, and we really want to make sure you have that information still.
That's great. We want to continue our tour of the refresh of A2-A3, and of course, after we finish, we'll be taking a look at the print edition of this Sunday's paper, and we'll be able to see how it came together for
Mhm.
today. Um, this story behind the story. This is the Times Insider column.
Yeah.
in this example, we're talking about Amanda Taub. It's a piece by John Otis. But this is effectively the Times Insider column, but you've given it more space.
Yeah.
What's the word count? Do you have a specific size that you're aiming for, or tell
We
us about that?
do. I think this one was probably around 800 words, I'm going to guess. I've gotten a little bit better at looking and kind of being able to ballpark that. But really, what we wanted to do with the insider space was not be so concerned with the word count. We wanted to give ourselves room to make something longer if we needed more text. But also room to show off some of our really great visual journalism, which is something that we weren't really able to do in our previous smaller space. So this example is a profile of Amanda Taub, who writes the Interpreter newsletter, really lovely profile written by John Otis. Amanda was a human rights lawyer before she became a journalist. She's a really interesting backstory. And we shot a portrait of her for this profile. And it would just be a shame to like shrink that down into a tiny picture. So we're playing a lot with format on our pages, which is something we didn't have the luxury to do in our old design. Our new pages are a little bit more flexible, a little bit more design focused, and we have more room to have fun with it. So this example is a beautiful portrait shot by her. We have a ton of original illustrations that will run as our top art. We'll do double photos, we'll do inset photos. We can just play with the space a little bit more. So, we can probably fit around 800 words, but the beauty of the new space is that we can just create more kind of inventive looks for the columns, which I think are just, more fun and interesting to look at. So we're excited about that.
In part because you moved the ads off of A2-A3.
Exactly, yeah.
Which I'll point out, this is one of the issues in terms of the health of the newspaper and thinking about the business side. I don't think it's a reflection of, you're not getting ads and we don't need to hold space for it. What we've seen is a very strong, business side in terms of ads, full page ads, inserts, the
Yeah.
wraparounds, etc. But there's a conscious decision from an editorial side that we are going to create space. We'll move the ads elsewhere, but we want to create space here for the
Yeah.
reader.
Yeah, and a lot of the ads, are still in the paper. They're just in different ways, as you mentioned. There's a lot of cool wraps, just like more inventive, I would say, presentations of those advertisements that are new, and we're sort of as a paper experimenting with what that looks like. So they might not be on two in the way that they have been, but as you said, wraps, inserts. And what's great for us is now we get more editorial space to play with, and that was a key part of the refresh, is how do we bring the reader like more, everything more of this type of content, and to do that we needed more space. So that was kind of the trade-off.
Sure. I want to, as we continue, Ron Thomas is joining us from Dubai. Ron is a former guest on our show, and it always makes it a point to watch, regardless of where he is in the world. Sometimes it's where in the world is Ron, so Ron, thank you for being such a loyal viewer of the show. We also want to ask you, as in terms of the refresh. So you've gotten some viewer feedback, and in particular, my understanding is that some people have actually written letters to you, hard copy, handwritten letters. There was one in particular that
Yeah.
a certain someone actually came and tapped you on the shoulder and said, "Hey, check this out." Tell us
Yeah,
about that.
I think you're talking about that story I shared with you the other day. Yes, so we got a lot of reader feedback on the new pages, a lot of emails, but also a lot of handwritten notes, which is kind of fun because I don't know about you guys, but I don't receive any fun letters like except for bills. So
Right.
it's like nice when you get real letters in the mail that aren't that. And AG, who's our publisher, the publisher of the Times, got a really nice note from a reader who liked the new pages, and it was sometime like last week or the week before, and it was, I think it was like 7 o'clock, and we were all kind of finishing up the day. We're at the office, and he came over to our desk and to Tom Jolly, who's the head of the print paper, and shared this note with Tom and myself and the rest of the team. And it's just so nice and kind of rewarding for us when we can hear from the reader and know that they really like what we're doing, and that they read the pages and they respond to them and they notice these changes, and that's always, really fun and rewarding for us. So that was a really kind of cool, special moment, I think, in the office for the whole team.
Well, I was going to say you'll get letters from readers, good and bad. I'm sure you get
Yeah.
the full range,
Yeah.
but I think it has to be different when you have the publisher walk down a letter and say, "Hey, we just got this. Check it out. Good job." Uh,
Yeah.
that's that's next level.
Yeah, we were really excited. And luckily we were all in the office that day too. So it would have been it would have been a bummer if he came over and we were like all from home that day, but we were all there. So it was really exciting. And yeah, we were all really happy. Sorry, I have like
Absolutely.
a line on my face. I think the sun's coming
It's where
through.
the
So
sun comes, exactly.
I'm
I
sorry
mean,
if
if you
I'm
want to adjust it, you're welcome to move a little bit to your right or
in like
left,
half
and then
shadow. Maybe I'll try
yeah,
to, that might be a little
just a
bit
little
better.
bit. You might have to move your
I'll
body the
just
other
keep
way
going
too.
like this. I'll keep bobbing in and out of
Bobbing it out.
of either side.
It's the challenge of natural light
Yeah.
on a show like this. Well, Megan, I want to thank you for walking us through the refresh and the various features.
Yeah.
Again, as a reminder to our viewers, um, most of the features that we talked about are not online yet. Some of them are. Certainly you can find the Times Insider pieces. We have the Birth of the Crossword and Volume One, capturing the religions of New York on camera. I don't know if that's today's Insider piece or if
Yes,
it
it
was.
is. And
It's
I'm sure
great.
we'll see it when we go through the walkthrough.
Absolutely. But you can scroll down. There's a great piece on the lives lost to guns, the lives they lived, which we'll be taking a look at, and you can see the rest of them. So Paula will share a link to this page, the Times Insider page. And as folks know, when we get to the hard copy, I always say that's my favorite part of the paper. I kind of think of, I mean, the whole show is kind of like a Times Insider. We have the person who leads the Times Insider columns and process in A2. It's very meta when you think of it that way. The
Yeah.
inside the Times discussion. Um, so let's go ahead and bring up the paper, and we will take a look at the sections, and we'll pay particular attention. What I'm going to do is to jump to the magazine. Want to talk Puzzle Mania, Putin's War, but we'll start with A2-A3. But we won't go through the rest of the A book for now, just in the interest of time, because there's so many interesting pieces to take a look at. So the big reveal for this week's A2-A3, and right there, as you can see, we have um, the insider column, the story behind the story, photographing the religions of New York. So thank you. You took my advice. The how you got that shot is today. Um, the first thing I notice about this is that you can visually it it has so much more real estate than the old insider column. The insider column used to
Yeah.
start right about here, if I'm not.
Yeah. Well, we
Um,
moved the masthead over, if
yep.
you picked up on that. So that was kind of, we were a little nervous to to move the masthead from where it was over, but everybody loved the new design, so we got away with it. But yeah, that gave us a lot more room for the insider column, which
It,
is great for a story like this, which is from a photographer, Jim Estrand, who
yeah.
photographed a really beautiful story that you'll see in the Metropolitan section once we get there. But the story was photography in nature, so we wanted to feature more than one photo for that.
Yeah. Which is great. And I'll point out that since we're talking about James, I'm sure that several of his pictures will be in the year in pictures, which will come out January 1st. We don't have a show that day. We're taking off for the 25th and the 1st, but on January 8th we will be back and we'll be focusing on the year in pictures. So I'm sure that James's work will be featured prominently. As if you look at below the fold on A2, you see some familiar sections. This is the newspaper and beyond. Today's paper, an audio, the quiz, cooking, the quote of the day. Most people who are churchgoers think of Christmas morning not as a religious time, but as family time, stockings and brunches and staying in your pajamas until midday or later. That's referencing the idea that pews may be nearly empty Christmas morning. I will say that when I have gone to church on around Christmas, the Christmas Eve service has been nice, but also the usually that evening. I certainly will stay home on Christmas morning. And for folks who will be celebrating Hanukkah this week, Tuesday, I believe, right? That Tuesday to Tuesday of next week?
I think it's Tuesday. Yeah, this Tuesday, I think, is when Hanukkah starts.
Right.
Yeah.
The other features at the bottom, last week's top trending headlines. That seems new to me. Is that a feature?
Yeah, this is new also. It's kind of our 2.0 of the conversation, which you used to see on the inside left bank on A3. So this is where we highlight sort of the news that's trending online. We refer to stories that are getting a lot of traffic or a lot of comments on the Times' website, but we sort of recast the element a little bit to provide some more insight into the journalists, but also how the readers are engaging with the story. So was it emailed? Was it garner a lot of comments? Was it popular on Twitter? Give some more insight into our journalists and also our readers and their relationship with the text.
And we have the headline from history, which used to be a horizontal piece in the bottom left corner, but it's still there. Man who got baboon cells is doing well, doctors say.
There's some weird headlines from history, and we love the funky ones.
Is that so? It's a headline, not weird headlines, right? You're not always going to go with weird.
No, sometimes they're very official and historical, and sometimes they're like really bizarre. I think we had one about a cheese festival in New York like 2 weeks ago, and it's fun to get a mix of all the different headlines.
I do want to point out Greg Pilska is watching. Greg, thank you. Loving the show so far. Greetings from New York City. We will be getting to Puzzle Mania shortly. So, Greg, hold on. I know you played a role with that. We'd love to. Any comments you make on the screen, we'll definitely show when we get to Puzzle Mania. But thank you for watching, Greg. So we have the page A3 in front of us, and we have the Dateline. This one is highlighting Lima, Peru, Dakar, Senegal, Seoul, and Melbourne, Australia. One thing that I noticed, and I think I'd only seen 2 examples previously, just in terms of some of the research I'd done. You didn't include anything from the U.S., from North America. Was that intentional to show more of the international work?
We just try to do a big kind of variety of interesting datelines from the week. So I think last week we had one from the US. So we try to mix it up, week over week, just to sort of showcase the global nature of the report. We'll include ones from the US occasionally, but if we did one last week, maybe we don't do one this week.
Got it. Facts of interest. I think that was new and noteworthy in the old A3. Yep. And a vertical treatment here instead of the box across the top. Yep. We have word through the Times, which is kind of right at the fold. So I'm going to try and move this up under the camera. You can see the tracking how one word has changed throughout our report. And this week's word is salty, which obviously has evolved over time in terms of its usage. Don't have to read the article to see that. Tell us about, let's see if I make sure we get this in the shot, this little sketch above just below the ruler, right? This little flag.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So that's our spot illustration. We do that every single day. I'm actually opening my paper so I can look at it while we talk about it. And every month a different artist will take on the spot illustration and do a theme. So I think this month must be flags. I have to check. Last month it was fungi. It's been cats and dogs. It has a different theme every month, and there's always a hidden nod in the news to the newspaper. Sometimes it's not so hidden, sometimes it's pretty hidden, but the newspaper is always in the spot illustration in some capacity. I think you could probably fairly easily find it today, but readers love the spot. Actually, when we did the refresh, I think a lot of people thought the spot was gone because it wasn't in the space it usually is. And I had to email a lot of anxious folks and say, don't worry, it's actually just on the top of that page. Like, here's where you can find it. So it's really fun. We can get playful with this.
So I wanted to get a closer look at that spot. And you said that each one has a homage to the Times?
Yes, each one will have a reference to the newspaper visually in some way. So like today, the newspaper is the flag. Sometimes it's rolled up, sometimes it's hidden. It just depends on the artist. We give the artist a lot of creative freedom here.
So on the top of A3, take a look for the illustration at the very top, and try and figure out what that reference to the New York Times is. Let's go ahead, and while we have the camera open, so we're switching. I'm using my phone so that I can show the Putin's war piece more effectively, and then we'll switch back to the other sections. Putin's war is a special report. It's huge online. Definitely check it out. But it also has a wraparound cover, which is always interesting. So you can see what they did here. Let's see if I can. Sorry about. If I only had a third hand, that would certainly help. But this is the wraparound cover showing a map. This is a Times investigation based on interviews, intercepts, documents, and secret battle plans. What are these reports called, at least internally?
Yeah, so we call these heaves, which basically just means a really big story.
A really big story.
Yeah. This is actually printed as a special section, which you've noted. So it's a separate section in the paper, but all these big, long stories, I think this one was like 10,000 words or something crazy, we'll call heaves.
And so this is, I just want to give people that sense. What we'd like to do with the read along is what you're not going to be able to see online. Now, we do show online features because we also appreciate the online treatment, the interactive work that the Times does.
Yeah.
But in this case, the print, really big headline in the top left corner, or rather, pull quote, "This isn't war, it's the destruction of the Russian people by their own commanders." And this dominant photo across
Yeah.
not just the bottom half, but almost the bottom 2/3 of the page. The invasion of Ukraine had barely begun and Russian casualties were piling up. So just want to flip through this real quickly. Another dominant photo, this one across the top. At some moments of battle, Russia's planes outnumbered Ukraine's 15-1, but many never made it home. It's a 6-part report, the invasion of Ukraine. Again, a dominant photo, fireworks at the Kremlin. Part 2, the hubris of Vladimir Putin. We have Part 3, military gutted by rot. Again, dominant photos throughout. Part 5, divided ranks, starting in the top left. Part 6, cannon fodder, which recalls Russia's role in World War I, sending troops to battle, cannon fodder, and then that wraparound cover at the end. No advertising, which is nice to see on a section like this of such import. But Putin's war, definitely check it out online if you get a chance. It's definitely a good piece. So the two sections that we wanted to spend time with in particular, after talking about the A2-A3 refresh, are the New York Times Magazine and Puzzle Mania. So let's take a look at that right now. So we'll talk about New York Times Magazine first. This is a special section or takeover, if you will. I believe they spent the whole almost the whole magazine on this story, the lives they lived. And I'll just say their names real quick. Juan Carlos Robles Corona Jr., born 2007. That would make him, 15? Paula Tupo Bloomfield Tahi, born 2006. Shiwei Berry, 2009. Sadie Berry, 2012. Potentially siblings on the same page. So that's going to be my guess. Rashad Smith, 2004. Darius Dugas II. My apologies if I'm mispronouncing names. Angela Yambo, Elijah Gomez, Sincere Cole, Levante A. Williams, Tioni Theus, and Kane Coronado. All children who were killed by gun violence in 2022. Here's the editor's note. You can't, this is not the experience you see online, which is why we love print so much. The white text on black, I mean, there's a bit of that online, but the black across the top 2/3 of these pages. This is a piece by Jake Silverstein on why they dedicated this issue to these kids. You worked on an insider piece about this. Tell us a little bit about this package.
Yeah,
As I flip through.
so this was a really big effort by the magazine team and a cross collaboration effort between the magazine team, graphics design, digital news design, a lot of different groups at the Times. And the project was actually in part inspired from a story in 2019. In 2019, Eddie Hill was a 10-year-old boy from St. Louis. He was killed by a stray bullet, and Matt Purdy, the Times' editor at large, wrote about him for the Lives They Lived package in 2019. It's an annual package that the magazine does every year that looks back at the deaths of people from the year. And that story just stuck with Matt, and it stuck with him and Jake Silverstein, who's the editor-in-chief of the magazine. And the two of them this year really wanted to just devote so much space to this really important topic. So they got together with a ton of reporters and journalists. Actually, over 50 people worked on this project. And throughout their work, two sort of sister stories emerged. One was, let's tell the stories of 12 families that lost their children to gun violence. And to do that took obviously working with the families. All of these photos, Gail Bickler, who's the creative director, shared that all of these photos are photos that the families submitted themselves, or photos that the kids actually took themselves, which is really, really powerful. So the one story is sort of the profiles of their lives. And then this second story that went with it is a big data story. Two of our data reporters actually wanted to create a data set that illustrated this massive and devastating issue of gun violence in children. And they put together a database on kids who died from gun violence this past year. And to do that, they had to kind of cull all of this data from other organizations. So these two sort of sister stories emerged from these conversations, and it took a team of over 50 people the better part of a year to execute the magazine as you see it now. So a really big effort for a really, really important topic.
And you can see some of the data here right on cue. Black boys are now 8 times as likely as other children to die by gunfire. Just incredible. And it was Dr. Chandrasekhar had made reference to it earlier in the in the show. On vacation, he got to be the other kid. Now, the other, feature of this is that it's very much the lives they lived. These
Mhm.
aren't obituary. These aren't focusing on how they died. These
Yeah.
aren't focusing on the gun violence itself. These are focusing on their lives. And what's interesting online, and you can see, like you said, these are photos that were submitted by the families that were from some of the kids' phones.
Yep.
Um, there are also TikTok videos and personal videos that are on the online treatment. This one, she never wanted a sweet 16, but it was the greatest night of her life. This is about Angela, and the byline on this, Andrea Elliott, who was a guest on our show about a year ago. So it's nice to see this big spread pictures.
Yeah.
And even, to me, what I'm looking at this is that when you think about photos as a photo editor, and you're looking at resolution, what works, how big can you blow up that photo, etc. Um, this photo, doesn't have the same resolution as a sharp photo, and that's okay. I think that's great that they were able to blow it up anyway, even if it gets a little bit softer.
Yeah. Yeah, they really wanted to highlight, as you put it, these children's lives and their interests and their families, and as you said, really keep it focused on that piece of things. And I think we were all really moved to see this feature come together, and I hope everybody gets a chance to read it. It's really well done and really important.
More the data, gun violence is rising all over the United States, but children in big cities are more than 3 times as likely to be killed as children in small towns. What's interesting about the way they laid it out in the magazine is that they were able to intersperse the profiles with these data essays, whereas online they're separate pieces. So it really speaks to the different experience you get in print versus online.
Yeah.
Again, another 2-page spread in terms of the photo. As we flip through the rest and get another data piece, the gun violence crisis increasingly affects children of every age, even the youngest ones. This is Childhood's Greatest Danger, Part 4, in terms of the data. And it is the whole magazine that is devoted to this. And I haven't seen any ads till now either, which again is a good call. Here's an essay. Dear reader, is it enough to be informed? And if it isn't, now what? This is written by Mitchell Jackson, and my recollection is that he. I don't know if you remember, if you knew his story. He had a gun or was involved in some violence when he was younger. Do you remember
I don't.
what his story is? There's something about his. I think he's a writer now, but
Hmm.
he was impacted by gun violence when he was younger.
Hmm.
But again, this layout, with the black, negative space across the top, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. I think it sort of represents, I don't know if this was their intention, I'm just speculating, but the absence, right, that was left
Of course.
behind, this negative space.
So they did, the only thing they added was the puzzles at the end, in terms of content, and then a house ad, the Sunday crossword, not to be confused with the super mega crossword we'll take a look at in just a second, and then a house ad for the New York Times. I think that's great. And this back piece, Question Everything, a Stone Reader, essays from the New York Times philosophy series. So that was the New York Times Magazine, The Lives They Lived. And as I mentioned, definitely check out the online treatment for that piece. I want to bring up a question. Miriam Berkeley had a question. Is it possible with a digital subscription to see the physical layout? We know we can get today's paper, which shows exactly what's in each day's paper, and you can get the front page. But I don't think there's a way to see a PDF of the actual paper, correct?
So if you, I don't want to speak out of turn. I think that if you have an e-reader, you can see if you like subscribe to an e-reader model, I think you can see PDFs of the pages. I'm not 100% sure on that. You can definitely see the PDF of the front page on the Times'
Yes.
website. I don't know about the magazine, if there's a way to see those as PDFs, or if you would just see it as the online version.
From what I've seen, there is an e-reader version, but it's not it doesn't replicate the layout of the online. It's more just an easier to read kind of online treatment. But we'll get confirmation on that for you, Miriam, and get back to you on that. Eric Sharfstein is saying hi from Ottawa. Eric, thank you for joining us. And let's see what else, other comments that have come in. And Mary Curtis, certainly speaking for all of us, heartbreaking. So much promise in these young folks. I grew up in West Baltimore. One of the kids that many in this country would throw away without a thought. Mary, thank you for sharing that. We really, really appreciate that. And Paula shared a link to the online version of the lives they lived, which I certainly encourage you to check out. I know we're hitting 9:57, and folks might be leaving to watch the World Cup in 3 minutes, but we do want to check out Puzzle Mania. So if you can hang on for just a few minutes, Megan,
Yeah.
we might go into stoppage time right at 10 o'clock, which means for those who are not familiar with the term in soccer, we're going on beyond the stated, the timer, if you will, the 90-minute timer. Interesting. We also have 90 minutes for our show. But we're going to go a little bit longer than 90 minutes, and you don't know how long that's going to be. It won't be too long, but it's you have to wait till the ref blows the whistle to end the show in the game. So let's check out Puzzle Mania, which is always fun to look at. This is a special annual section put out by New York Times Games, and it's a gatefold, not a Pano 8. It opens on one side here, but let's open it all the way, and that's why I have the phone out. I don't have enough desk space to show it properly, but I do have this is a big desk. Let's see if this is, I'll move the papers from underneath here so they're not in the way. But this is the Super Mega Crossword. Are you a crossword person?
I do Joel's Mini. I've attempted the real crossword. I can do like Mondays. Like I'm better at the easier crosswords at the beginning of the week than I necessarily am later in the week.
Yeah.
I'm a big Wordle person.
Wordle, sure.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do crosswords. I used to be able to get the Mondays and get most of Tuesday, but Wednesday I started falling apart
Yeah,
years ago when I
it
used to do
starts getting
crosswords.
tricky.
But it's Joel Fagliano who did the Super Mega Crossword, and Miriam says she loves the minis as well, and you can find the minis on A2 daily, or is it?
Yes, that was something we introduced with the refresh. The mini appears on A3 daily now. We used to not include it on weekends. Now we do, which everyone was really excited about. So we're glad to have that.
That's great. And I want to get back. Greg Pilska is watching. I know that Greg had a role to play with Puzzle Mania. Hopefully, Greg, you can share with us your contribution to this special section, or I'll just show everyone your contribution. The Meta Puzzle Contest. So this issue of Puzzle Mania features a contest using the 7 mini puzzles on this page, plus a set of highlighted words in the Super Mega Crossword. Instructions on how to combine the mini puzzle answers and the super mega words to produce a final timely answer appear bottom right. So it's a puzzle. It's puzzles within a larger puzzle, I guess. what was Churchill's? Was it Churchill's comment? A riddle wrapped in an enigma, something to that effect. Someone will fill that in for me. I'm sure Paula might be doing some quick googling. But there's Greg's comment. Yes, the meta puzzle is connected to Joel's incredible crossword as well. We had a great time coming up with how to do it.
Oh, Greg, you're gonna have to email me with that information. How you came up with it.
Yeah, right. And there's a welcome from the editor at the top. And of course, Will Shorts is the puzzle editor of the New York Times. It has its own masthead, puzzle editor Will Shorts, section editor, design director, senior director, designer, Puzzle Mania online hub, deputy puzzle editor, copy editor, research editor, production editor. That's a full masthead there. And Greg is also saying you can solve each of the mini puzzles independently, but then the answers to the mini puzzles relate to parts of the super mega. And I can't tell you how that works. So there's a little box in the corner for your final answer. You follow the instructions in the super mega crossword. Use the lines below to reveal the answer to the question, what does a Puzzle Mania solver say after completing this meta puzzle? I can answer that. Thank God. I mean, we could come up with our own answers. What would they say? Forget about trying to solve the puzzles. I need a trip to Disney World. I mean, what?
You need so much patience, right?
I was going to say
frustrated easily.
My next option would be great. I finished in time for Memorial Day. We could have some fun with this. This is a geography is a part of when in Emory. 8 country outlines are shown below, not drawn to the same scale. The words and phrases at the bottom are capitals of these 8 countries scrambled and with a letter added. So that's interesting in terms of working that part of the puzzle. So lots of different types of puzzles on this, not just a big super mega crossword, which would have been good enough. But Greg says he thought that was funny. And spoiler alert, it's not few, or thank God.
That's and just it's what not, we're going to say when we finish.
It's not, I'm ready for Memorial Day. We could keep working on this, Greg, if you want. But anyway, this is Puzzle Mania. And I certainly encourage you to check this out. And I left this extra page because of the way that it's the layout. It's this flyer. So there are more puzzles. The word game, Spiral, 2 bits on the top right, a cryptic crossword, split decisions. Oh, and here are the super mega clues all on one page.
That's a mega clue list.
It's super mega. It's super mega.
I also, Neil, just want to quickly say how beautiful the design of this whole package is.
Yes.
I need to find out who was the designers behind this, but like the text treatment, the layout, I mean, it's not easy to fit all of these things in a way that looks good and makes sense. So
sure.
Kudos
to Greg is saying his lips are sealed, but thank you for highlighting the puzzle section. The designers, so Fernanda Didini is the senior designer. And the copy editor, Harvey Dixon. I'll go through the full list. Section editor, Dean Robinson. Design director, Deb Bishop. Senior designer, Fernanda Didini. Puzzle Mania Online Hub, Dylan Campbell and Everdeen Mason. Deputy puzzle editor, Joel Fagliano. Copy editor, Harvey Dixon. Research editor, Leah Miller. And production editor, Hillary Shanahan. So hopefully you can connect with some of those folks. But yeah, absolutely. And Greg is saying, thanks for all the insights. I'll email you all the answers you want. Greg, my email address is neil@digimentors.group. Feel free to copy me on that email if
we'll need all the help we can get, Greg.
Right. And Greg adds, Greg, appreciate all your comments here. This is definitely adding to the show. I will mention that I had some puzzle ideas that the art department nixed because they would have taken up too much space. Those folks did beautiful work with all the material we gave them. I do know that this is also work for Mike Connors and the printing press team at College Point. This kind of fold with an insert. I know from our many conversations with Tom Jolly, Tom has been on the show 3 times. Whenever there's a special section, connecting with Mike early to test things out, to figure out how it's going to print. They have to get it out to the printing presses a week early at least to make sure it works. So a lot of pieces have to come together to make something like this work. Greg, thank you again for joining us, and hopefully next year for Puzzle Mania we can get someone from your team, or if you have a similar meta puzzle in next year's issue, maybe you could be a guest on our show. We definitely would appreciate the insights in terms of what we're seeing with Puzzle Mania. So with that, Megan, what we want to do is to make a few quick announcements and then bring you back on for a pro tip for writers, if you don't mind. Think about what advice would you give to writers on the show. So I want to thank you again for watching. Our New York Times read-along team, Sri Srinivasan is our host. I am the executive producer and guest host, Neil Parekh. Paula Kiger helps produce the show on Facebook and LinkedIn, dropping in comments to various articles and links, etc. And true to form in terms of her the role that she plays during the show, and I'll keep you off a break for just a little bit, Megan. Paula shared an update. The New York Times replica edition, powered by Press Reader, provides the daily newspaper exactly as it appears in print, including advertisements, sports box scores, and the New York Times crossword puzzle. Replica edition also includes offline reading access via the Press Reader app. Replica edition is included with all US-based New York Times home delivery subscriptions. You can also sign up for a replica edition subscription. So that is something folks might want to take a look at. I think it was Miriam that was asking about that. She also got the quote for me. I think it's a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. And that is Churchill. That's how I was describing the super mega crossword. We want to thank Muck Rack, our longtime sponsor of the New York Times Read Along. Thank you for all of your support. And remind folks that the New York Times Read Along is produced by Digimentors, a social and digital consulting firm started by Sri Srinivasan and Andrew Lee. I am proud to be Vice President of Events and Communications for Digimentors. As you can see, we do more than just produce events. We also do a lot of social and digital consulting, event amplification. We also do training and workshops. We also want to thank the local Connection newsletter, the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University brings you the local Connection newsletter each week. It offers story ideas and pro tips for journalists. Best of all, it's free. You can subscribe at bit.ly/local news tips, bit.ly/local news tips. With that, we will bring back Megan DiTrolio for a final word and a pro tip for writers. Megan, thank you again for everything that you shared with the refresh and the insights that you offered. What tips do you have for writers?
So I think my pro tip would actually steal from an insider that we did about a week ago, I want to say. And this is something I actually do myself when I'm editing, but a lot of writers do it, which is to, on your final pass through a story, to read it aloud to yourself. There's a couple of writers in the newsroom who we feature. Dan Barry is actually one of them, who writes really long narrative, beautiful features, as I'm sure you know. And he reads everything aloud to his wife, and other reporters that we talk to read things aloud to themselves or their dogs. And I do this as well. And sometimes I even listen to it aloud. You can play the text on your computer. It really helps you just hear out if the text sounds good, if the narrative reads lyrically, which you don't really pick up on if you're just reading it in your head. It's a great tip if you are worried about dropped articles or words that are not caught by spell check but are actually spelled wrong. So that's my pro tip: is writers and editors, before you publish a story, read it aloud, and I promise that you will find a lot of things that you wouldn't have found if you just read it in your head. And I actually read pages 2 and 3 aloud every night before we send them to the printer. So I'm very dedicated to the read aloud tip.
That's a great tip, Megan. Thank you very much. Read your writing aloud before you call it good. If folks joined late, you can always watch the recording from the beginning on the same links that you're watching now on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentor's website. Just a few minutes after we go off the air, you'll see the video play from the very beginning. We want to thank everyone for joining us. Diane says that's such an excellent tip, reading aloud. So thank you, Megan, for that. We do want to acknowledge that we are 11 minutes into stoppage time. We're almost to go. Thank you for sticking with us. I know that there's a very exciting World Cup final that started a little while ago, but you have 80 minutes more for the game. And, it probably be really exciting in the last 5 minutes. So you have time grab breakfast and then join. Ken says, thank you, Megan, Neil, production team. Great show. What a privilege to enjoy this. And he also loved the read along, the read aloud tip, if you will. As a final thought, want to remind folks that this is our last show for 2022. We're taking 2 weeks off, and we will return January 8th, focusing on the year in pictures. So thank you. Have a safe holiday. Hope you get to spend time with your loved ones. Be safe while you travel. Be safe as far as COVID is concerned. It's still out there. We just wish you well and look forward to seeing you in the new year. Thank you very much. And again, Megan, thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil. Thanks, everyone. This is so fun.
Bye-bye.